Welcome everyone to another Ask an Investor session. I'm Shilpi, Product Manager of Quidroom, a social platform built for investment experts to efficiently manage their global community of professional investors. Before we begin, just as a quick disclaimer, the content shared in here is for information purposes only and should not be construed as legal, investment, tax, financial, or other advice. For all investors listening into the session and the podcast, if any of your questions are unanswered or to attend future investor sessions live, you can join hundreds of other investors in any of the communities on Quidroom. Today, we're coming to you from one of our new rooms, a gender diverse investment world. This is an open and friendly community of investors who are dedicated to advancing gender diversity in the investment industry and supporting one another with advice and mentorship. The invitation link to the room will be posted in the chat. From this community, I have investment expert Lajla Aganovic here with me today, the head of venture engagement in Logitech International, here to talk about the shifting gender balance in finance and the impact for investors and entrepreneurs. Hey, Lajla, how are you doing?
Hi, Shilpi. Thanks a lot for having me today.
The pleasure is mine. Lajla, maybe you want to start us off by giving a bit of information about yourself. From looking at your profile, you have a very interesting background. You started off in a more scientific path, but decided to go the asset management way. So why don't you tell us maybe a little bit about your origin story, as we'd say?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yes, I am what you would call an engineer who turned bad. I went from a fully engineering background. So I studied communication systems at the EPFL here in Switzerland. And I did a master's in cryptography and security of systems. So super interesting fields. But I wanted to explore also a little bit the macroeconomics and the real economy, basically what we were doing in that scientific environment. Also, what impact it could have on the economy, and especially at a much more international level. So I joined the asset management because of that, because I knew that I would be in direct contact with people from all around the world. And when you touch upon things, for example, like fast moving consumer goods, or when you touch upon raw materials, this is when you go really deep into the roots of each different culture, country. And I was keen really on discovering that. So I was super happy to be there. And then after a while, I understood that moving a little bit further with that background in economy that I acquired, because I also did a CFA along the way, I wanted to really patch things together. So my background in engineering, so everything I understood about that deep technology environment, together with the economical background that I acquired. And so this was perfectly coming in together with venture capital. So then I moved to that side into a big international group that was where I was really taking care of direct investments and also allocation into venture capital funds around the world to really get a sizable network, because it's all about network. And then I moved into a venture capital firm. And now here I am accelerating external innovation, internal innovation in Logitech, and I'm working every single day with engineers, which is super cool, thrilling. I mean, I love what I do, so I think that passion is important, right?
Absolutely. I think passion is definitely one of the main things that needs to drive us in the world. And I mean, suffice to say, Lajla, you've had a lot of experience across various sectors in the whole industry. So there's so much for us to dive into. But let's circle back to kind of what we want to discuss today. So how has the experience been for you for so many years in, say, portfolio management, venture capital, technology, everything? And I guess more specifically, the question is, how has it been for you as a woman in the industry?
If I go really back when I started in the asset management, so being a woman, a young woman, when you enter a trading floor with 98% of men, is of course super intimidating, and no matter how confident or motivated you are. I thought I were, and I was shaking at the beginning. But then you also go through that everyday life with all those guys, and you have to have all those small adjustments. For example, these guys have their own way of arguing during meetings, and it did get often quite loud and animated in meeting rooms. Okay, so you get adjusted. Sending emails, for example, without a hello or thanks or bye, nothing, just one sentence, straight to the point. Whoa, okay, adjustment. Quite colorful jokes as well. So basically they have their own way of communicating. And so yes, men do behave differently when there are no women around. But again, this is what could be expected, right? But now, having said that, even if I had already been surrounded by men for years, because I mean, I was an engineer, the environment here was a lot different, and what was expected from me was different. I was there, a young professional. I had everything to learn, and this was a highly competitive industry. So on top of that, of building that career in that environment, I had to get accepted by this masculine ecosystem. So it is a highly delicate balance when you think about it, because you had to be respected by your peers as a woman, and then you also cannot be left aside during the small talks, you know, the breaks, the drinks, the after work things, because this is where most of those guys bond, and this is when the most important information is exchanged. So you really have to be part of it, and like in any group, the outsiders have to adapt to the biggest part of the group in order to be part of that group. Otherwise, you'll never fully integrate. So I'd say I would compare that as when you move to a different country. You know, you have to learn the language and you have to learn the social codes. So I did my best to adjust, but while keeping my feminine touch. And I really also needed to build the trust with those guys, because it's again about managing long-term relationships.
Wow. Okay, that's a really lovely way to put it, actually, because it is all about relationships, what you build, the network that you build over the years. So it's really interesting to hear you kind of put that into interesting anecdotes and kind of a very interesting metaphor there. So let me now ask then, how have you seen it evolve over the last so many years, you know, from when you started versus perhaps where it is now?
For that, I can take one example. For example, one example that's at that time, today it makes me smile. At that time, it did hurt. It did hurt a lot. And it wasn't easy to gain the respect. So you try to always kind of, you know, do better and be there and answer and be present in all those meetings. But then you face that comment like as a young, strong woman with a strong personality, you are considered as opinionated, like meaning problematic. Whereas when you can hear it for your young peer who is a guy, the same guys would say, wow, great, he's ambitious. So again, it was really, and I don't think that it was intentional. It was just because they were not used to that diversity. So what is changing today is that whether we want it or not, that mix of men and women is slowly but surely changing, because more and more women are taking leading position in finance. And it is a good thing, because this is going to be a much more balanced environment, I'd say, which is going to bring equal chances for real talents, because we have to focus on talents. It's not about being a guy or being a girl. And it's not about filling just empty quotas. It's really about pushing the best talents up there. And I think that girls have a lot to bring in making that industry much stronger and also much more resilient. And when I say much resilient, it's just because in terms of looking at one same object, if you have two people who look at it from a completely different perspective, they're also going to be questioning different things, making the decision of buying that object or not buying it for reasons X, Y, Z much stronger as a proposition, because you're going to be having a look at a much larger, I would say, set of risks. And that's what I feel, that's what I find really fascinating in that gender balance.
Yeah, that's definitely very, very fascinating. And I understand what you're saying, where the balance is sort of shifting already, and we can already see the changes happening. And I think one way that we see this happening very often is that there is bigger groups and bigger communities of women coming together in various industries and creating sort of support groups and things, which has its own merits, but it also has some downfalls. So what are some maybe different communities that you've explored or been a part of over the last many years?
Oh, I've been part of many of these. I mean, I started, of course, as all the girls, I think, in finance, with women in finance, then women in hedge funds, then women in venture capital, and finally, one that I really liked because I'm passionate about the subject, women in cybersecurity. And it was not because, I mean, frankly, and surprisingly, maybe enough, not because I wanted to get out of that man's world, like people would expect you to say, oh, I'm suffocating. No, not at all. It was really because I needed to hear stories of other women who were just like me, or maybe ahead of me in their careers, because I needed role models. I needed to somehow reassure myself, you know, because the more you go up, fiercer the competition. So that low single digits of percentages of women basically being active is in finance and taking those lead roles decreases even more. So it becomes more difficult. So I needed to be able to ask questions that I couldn't ask my male colleagues, and to which you cannot find either answers in any book or any magazine. So I needed to ask also without being judged, without being perceived as potentially being the weakest link. If I came up with something like, I don't know, how do you manage your career and motherhood, for example, you know? So it's basically, I needed to be, again, reassured that it was possible to continue pursuing my dreams in a field that I'm really genuinely passionate about, and still manage to remain a woman. So finally, I would say that in my perspective, at least, making you have to make useful connections everywhere around the world, whenever you are, whenever you can. And your network is really such a powerful asset. Whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter. So it's always good, I think, to take any opportunity to meet interesting people. But now, Shilpi, to what you said before, coming back maybe to those downturns, when I hear feminist or anti-feminist debates as soon as such clubs are mentioned, frankly, I simply don't see the point, and I don't want to get into those debates, because again, the financial society, slowly for sure, but surely, is evolving, and it is integrating more women in key positions every day. So I think that winners of tomorrow, whether they are men or women, will have to adapt and to navigate in an environment where the codes that I mentioned earlier are effectively changing. And it's about really, again, finding that right balance and a common language. That would be the point for me.
That's a very good point. And I think you really nailed it there with what exactly is the purpose of these groups. I mean, it is about finding people that you can ask advice. You need mentorship, you need advice. You want to learn from people that have already gone through certain things that you are likely to go through. So if we focus on that being the main purpose, then that's really what we're trying to build here, right? So say, you know, these sort of coaching and investment groups and things that you're part of, I suppose then what would you specifically choose to change about them? You know, what is the main thing today that you think is the biggest problem with it, if you had to choose, say, one thing to fix it?
You know, when for example, coaching, I'm just taking examples that I've seen, and being on one side of the table or the other doesn't matter. Coaching a female founder or having a female, a woman basically as a coach can be very different in terms of communication or sensitivity to some aspects of the business strategy, tolerance to risk, return expectations, whatever. And again, mutual understanding is key for a healthy relationship between an entrepreneur and an investor. Because as an investor, of course, you need to understand what you're going to be investing in and basically partnering with. Because especially if I take private investments are not something that you can sell tomorrow. This is not a stock. This is, I compare it always to a marriage. Once you commit, you're going to be there for years. So you'd better do your due diligence well. Make sure that what the other side of the table is telling you, that you really fully get it, and that you understand what are the risks, and that you are okay with those risks, and that you are able to carry on with that same team for a long time. So that's why this understanding is super important. And again, I think that's also having that different perspective as a man or woman can really bring that resilience to a business model, and flexibility also to really maybe flip or switch at a point where it is really important for a business to kind of, you know, to get a breakthrough and to change an approach, because you see, for example, that what you've been doing until now is just hasn't worked, and having a fresh, different perspective really helps. So again, survivors are those those who show the strongest capacity to adapt fast to a changing environment. I'm a really strong believer in that.
Yeah, that's, I think, the key to most entrepreneurs. I mean, that's how you know who is really going to make it big and who is not, is who is really willing to change and really willing to understand what exactly needs to be changed based on all of this. So, I mean, I think this is huge impact, not just for anyone in the financial industry or just investors entering the industry. It's about people that are, you know, they're trying to raise money now, trying to get money for their ventures and things, trying to understand how female leaders are thinking and how that's changing. So yeah, that's a really, really important point. I mean, I'd be curious, because you seem to know a lot about, especially founders and everything. Do you have any sort of interesting, concrete experiences or any stories that you would share? I'd really love to hear one.
One thing, for example, in venture capital that is a bit I had the impression to come back to some of those early years in finance, because again here in this is a branch where women represent again this low single-digit percentage on both sides of the table, as entrepreneurs and as investors. So as a woman, you often have to prove quite fast that you're not there to fill in some kind of quota, that you're really there because you're good and you're bringing something useful to the discussion. And now with some years of experience, I definitely am much more, you know, cool with all of that, and I don't lose my energy on focusing on how unfair some comments can be, but I focus really on showing by example whenever I can. And I've been also part of many boards where, you know, you see people starting questions or whatever, and it's not about, I would say, shouting the loudest. It's about really coming up with the right questions at the right time, and also knowing when not to say a thing to make your point. So what I want to say is that my concrete example is that I try to earn the trust of all the teams that I work with, and this takes time, and it's okay. But if you really want to create long-term value with the entrepreneurs that you're working with, you have to put yourself in their own shoes. And you have to help them look at the big picture, at the perspective, while at the same time managing the daily constraints and also the downturns. And yes, I am a woman, but I am also an engineer. And I understand deep tech fields like photonics, quantum, cryptography, neural networks. These are things that I'm good with. But then at the same time, I have that financing experience that gives me enough tools to pay attention to key business aspects, like in the startup business models, or the cash flows, team structure, or I don't know, the market strategy and pricing. So all these things are important for survival of the company. What I'm trying to say is that I'm putting myself together with those guys at the same level. And I'm working with them and asking them the questions that I would like someone to ask me if this were my business. Because I say, like, if they go down in my head, I also failed. So it's really trying to put yourself together on that same page with the people that you're working with, because trust is everything. It takes a long time to build it, and it takes nothing to lose it again. So again, there's no, I would say, concrete or magical way of doing things. It's just about being true and asking yourself questions also when you don't know things, because we don't know everything. I definitely don't, for example, invest in fields like medtech that I don't know anything about. You have much more people who are smarter than me out there who do that very well. But I try to stick to things that I know and bring the value that I can.
Yeah. Okay. That's definitely a very, very interesting thought process there, where we're looking at building trust and basically building the sort of feeling, the almost community feeling with internal teams, as well as obviously with entrepreneurs that are pitching to you. So I'm gonna ask maybe a question that could be a little bit controversial, but how have you found your peers, just men, women, anyone? How supportive has your peers been, or how much of an issue has that been within, say, the venture industry?
You mean men and women complementarity?
Yeah, basically.
I would say as women are still a very small portion of it, it's always super interesting to find women who are active in there and to get to know them, what their passions are, and basically where they want to move and how they work with companies. And when it comes to men, you see that there is a genuine willingness for them to integrate women more and more. But again, at the same time, and sometimes they realize it and they're like, oh, sorry, this I shouldn't react it that way or whatever. They are still used to that dynamic, basically, of working among guys. And again, I said, with the experience, I am completely fine with that. But I think that there is a genuine change of mind that is happening, and that people are willing to integrate women much more. Now, it's really about trying to stop the debate of whether and whether this is going to happen and how unfair things are, or whatever, to finally focus on what is the most important. Okay, how are we going to do that? What are the new codes? If I say X, I mean X, and I don't mean Y. And to try to find that transcoder, I would say, so that that information is really fluid, and that we can help the companies that we work with in a much more efficient way. Because this is important for everyone, especially for investors. You want to protect the money, the assets that you've put into a company. So you need to be able to understand when the person who sits in front of you, when she has a problem, you have to even be able to anticipate. What does he mean when he said sales are, for example, being kind of, not growing at the 20% that you're used to, but like kind of reaching a plateau or whatever. Okay, that means we're in a trouble in that market. You know, you have to interpret because you know the person on the other side, and you have to be able to directly kind of in your mind be preparing with the connections with people that you have in your network, or you know other people have in their network, that are going to be able to help that entrepreneur to move forward, to solve the problem. It's really about focusing on having one same goal and how to be able to efficiently reach the targets together and finding that common language, rather than focusing again on this problem on do we have enough women or not? Yes, we know that we don't have, and this is going to change. So let's make that change happen.
Absolutely. Let's make that change happen. I like that. So I think I'm going to ask one final question. And I think this would be a question on the minds of many younger people that are maybe entering the workforce for the first time, entering the financial industry for the first time. And personally, I think it's a question that I ponder a lot these days, is that with your experience, having gone through what you've gone through, knowing what you know with this mindset, what advice do you wish you could have received when you were younger?
I received many. You know, my father keeps telling me, and he started, I mean, when I was a kid, he always said, it's never a shame to fall along the way, but you should be ashamed if you don't get back on your feet again, you know. And I was so busy doing 10, 20 things at the same time, all the time, that I don't think I really understood the whole point until recently. I just knew that at that time I was feeling really down when things didn't work out the way I wanted, and I wish I had listened to that no shame more, because it's okay if things don't happen the way you want them at the moment you want them to happen. It's important to get something out of it, to understand basically something about yourself and to move on. My point is, the major advice that I would give to my younger self would be, take time from time to time to have a step back. And in order not to lose the perspective of what you're going for, and focus really on that big picture instead of being kind of drowned in those everyday tasks. Because we will always find a reason to feel unhappy. And feeling unhappy is really like a spiral. It can drive you down. You don't have time for that. You really need to go that way up. So I would advise myself, and I still do it today, to focus on what I can do better today and tomorrow, and find the best way to do it.
And that's very good advice, I think, for everyone. And I think everyone can really take away a lot from that. Thank you so much, Lajla, for everything that you've shared today. It's truly been a really enlightening and a very, very interesting discussion.
Thank you so much for having me, Shilpi. I love the subject. And in case you guys have any other questions, super happy to discuss further in the chat room. And thanks a lot for listening.
For those listening in who haven't yet joined the community on Quidroom, you can use the invite link that has been provided to join in. You can attend more of these meetups in the future that are announced inside the room, and you can connect with Lajla directly if you have questions or if you just want to share some of your thoughts as well. So here's to advancing the world of investments, the way we approach things, and to entrepreneurs and investors adapting to these positive changes of the shifting balance that we're seeing now. So that's all for today. Thank you so much, Lajla. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Greetings from Switzerland.